Hi Ed, let's talk about the way you can start to decrease the size of your apertures and get better control over your reed making. So one of the things that I learned the hard way is that even though cane looks straight, it's not always as straight as you think, and we have to be really careful about picking out the pieces that are going to give us the best result. So there is larger cane in the 10.5 to 11 category. That will give you a smaller opening, and cane that is smaller in the 10 to 10.5 range will actually give you a larger opening. So if you're trying to manage the opening of your reeds, try to go for larger cane, which you are. I hope that you have an 11.0 bed. If you're working with 11.0 cane on a 10.5 bed, there's a mismatch. So hopefully the radius gauges that you have, that I'm going to show you, you'll be able to match. You'll be able to pick out some cane that is actually 11.0, stick it in the bed that you have. Actually, I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you one that's 10.5 and one that's 11. Stick it in the bed and you'll see which one fits the best, and you'll know whether you have a 10.5 or an 11.0 bed. But that needs to be a match. You don't want a bed that's smaller than your cane. It always has to be the same size or larger, or you're going to get a distorted result. So I'm looking at this piece of cane. It looks pretty straight to the naked eye, but there are a couple of things that I want to start to measure. You can't just stick a splitter with this into this and expect a good result. So you're going to be getting this radius gauge in your package. So I'm going to use my radius gauge, and what I'm going to do is I am going to take the cane and stick it in the radius gauge, and I'm going to find the place where the circular part of the cane really fits well into these semicircles, and without any flat sides, and without any and without any holes, without any spaces. It's going to fit well, and I'm going to put that there. And some people actually lie the cane down before they split to get the flattest result, but for me, I'd rather get a clean semicircle than get something flat on here, because I'm going to measure for flat after the fact, and you can't do them both at once. So here I am. I've got this cane. I put my thumb on the side where I want the cane to be facing me. I take the splitter and I center the two prongs that are facing me in the middle of where my thumb is, and I split it. I now have three pieces of cane, but they're all not going to be the same. So I want to find out each one. This one is a perfect 10.5, but I still need to figure out what part of this tube I need to use. I want to find the very flattest part of the tube. If it's flat, a straight flat on a flat surface, you've got a perfectly great tube. But that's not usually how it works. Sometimes you get that. You never want it bowed like a bow and arrow. You don't want it that way. You can have the sides come up a little bit. You don't want it wild, and you know how to look for something that's twisted. That will never work. So even though this isn't completely flat, it's going to be a really nice piece of cane, because I'm going to find an area to actually cut off. I'm going to cut off the ends so that there's a lot of flat in the middle, and at the very least it touches down in the middle of the in the middle of this. So I'm going to look. I've got a pretty good eye for this. I'm going to cut left, and I'm going to cut right. I'm going to measure it again, and this is beautiful now. It's a really pretty flat piece of cane. It's straight. This one is 10.5, which is smaller than you want. But that is how you do it. I'm going to stick it in my pile. I'll do another one for you. This one is 10.5, but it is completely twisted. It's the ends are coming up and they're around. If you look at it from the top, it's just not sitting right. And if you wiggle it back and forth, it just doesn't sit right. It's just not stable. This, just go to the floor because you'll never be able to make a good reed out of it. Normally, if you can get at least one piece of good cane, really good cane, you're in good shape. This piece is a little bit more bowed, but if I move it along the flat surface, it's possible that if I just cut off a little bit on the left and then turn it around for the right, I'm going to need to test this, but it's possible I'll have something that'll work. And this will work. It doesn't come up, it's not bowed. It's not perfectly flat, but it's really pretty good. And this at least will make a good intermediate reed. So I'm going to stick that down. Okay, so that's what you do for that. Now, when it comes to the dial micrometer that I'm going to give you, which looks a little bit different than this, it can be used to measure a gouged piece of cane from the middle, and I'm going to find a gouged piece of cane. I don't have one right here. But it can also be used to measure the sides of the cane so that and along the way, so you understand how it's graded. So that's very important. Now, the other thing you can do with a dial micrometer, there's a tongue here, and you can take your reed and slip it into, the opening into this, and be very careful, and you lift this up by pressing down, and you will be able to measure all the dimensions in your reed. So you'll know how thin the tip is, you'll know how thick your heart is, and hopefully you're going to find out what your target thickness is for the cane you like the best, and you can also measure the back. So you'll be able to hopefully repeat a good setup for yourself to get more consistent results. Now, I've got a piece of paper here that is my cheat sheet for the things you can do to manage the size of the aperture. And I'm going to send this to you. A wider shape gives you a lower pitch and a larger opening. A narrower shaper tip has a higher pitch and a smaller opening. When you put more cane on the staple, when you move it down, you decrease the size of the opening. If you're tying your blanks to 73.5, your openings are going to be way big because the balance along the reed in the relationship to the staple is different. Larger diameter, smaller opening, smaller diameter, larger opening. Okay? And if everything is good except pitch, you could consider shortening the staple. Now, if you do have reeds that work really well but are too open, I'd suggest the following. Normally I recommend warmer water to soak it in, and sometimes even hot for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then you let it sit to taste. If your reeds are too open, I recommend that you have lukewarm water, not warm or hot water, and use it for 15 seconds or so. Watch it like a hawk for a couple more seconds or until it has the opening that you want. If it's a little bit too large, you can start by pinching the tip. And if that doesn't work, what I do is I pinch the back of the base of the reed, and this actually closes the tip, but it's more artificial because it's changing the structure of it versus just closing the opening when you do the tip. So those are my ideas for now. I want to see a sample of your reed to see what's going on, and hopefully when you get some gouge cane from me, you'll be able to see whether the gouge is a factor. And then we can start to isolate your problem, because you really have to work too hard when your opening's too big. And I know for myself, I'm now 60, and it's just so strenuous. I just don't want to work harder than I have to. So I'm going to send this off to you along by email, and I'll get your package out tomorrow.